She had lost everything before she even learned how to dream. Long before life could teach her about love, it taught her about suffering. On that cold day, sitting on the sidewalk with nothing but worn clothes and tired eyes, Emily truly believed that love wasn't meant for people like her. Funny thing is, the moment we give up on hope is often when fate quietly steps in and rearranges everything. When Emily was only 8 years old, a tragic accident erased her world in a single breath. Parents gone, home gone, safety gone. What followed was a childhood drifting from shelter to shelter, learning early that life can be unfair, cold, and painfully silent. That kind of silent suffering doesn't scream, it settles in your bones. And still, somehow, she carried something rare, kindness in the middle of hardship. The shelters became her temporary homes, but nowhere ever felt like home. She watched other children get adopted, watched families form around her while she remained invisible. Each rejection carved a little deeper, teaching her that perhaps she wasn't meant to be chosen. The counselors meant well, but their pity felt like another weight to carry. She learned to make herself small, to need less, to expect nothing. This wasn't bitterness, it was survival. When you're a child, learning that the world doesn't have a place for you, you adapt or you break. Emily chose to adapt. Even hungry, she shared. Even ignored, she smiled. Even wounded, she believed, at least a little, that people could still be good. Not because life was kind to her, but because she chose to be kind anyway. That choice, repeated over years, became her quiet rebellion against destiny. Yet deep inside, she no longer believed happiness or true love was possible for her. There's something profound about maintaining kindness when the world has shown you cruelty. Most people become mirrors of their pain, reflecting back the harshness they've received. But Emily was different. When she had 2 pieces of bread, she'd give one away. When someone was crying, she'd sit with them even if she had her own tears to shed. This wasn't naivety. It was a conscious choice to not let suffering define who she became. She understood, perhaps better than most, that pain can either destroy your humanity or refine it. She chose refinement. The years on the street taught her things no school ever could. She learned which corners were safest at night, which restaurant owners might slip her leftover food, which strangers to avoid, and which ones still had compassion in their eyes. She became fluent in the language of survival, reading faces, sensing danger, finding warmth in the coldest seasons. But more than that, she learned about human nature in its rawest form. She saw people at their worst and occasionally at their best. She witnessed how quickly comfort can turn to indifference, how easily people look away from discomfort. And here's the paradox most people miss. Sometimes, it's exactly when you stop expecting miracles that a miracle finds you. Emily had stopped praying for rescue years ago. She'd stopped imagining a different life, stopped letting herself dream beyond the next meal or the next safe place to sleep. Hope, she'd learned, could be more painful than hunger when it went unfulfilled. So she'd quietly buried it, telling herself that acceptance was easier than disappointment. But life has a strange sense of timing, doesn't it? Just when we've built the highest walls, just when we've convinced ourselves that certain things aren't meant for us, fate has a way of slipping through the cracks. What happened next wasn't luck, charity, or coincidence. It was an unexpected love, a collision between 2 broken lives that would trigger a profound transformation and offer both of them a second chance no amount of money could buy. What makes this story different from the fairy tales we're fed as children is its authenticity. This wasn't about a prince rescuing a damsel in distress. This was about 2 people, each carrying their own scars, each fighting their own battles, finding something in each other that money can't buy and status can't create. Emily didn't need saving in the traditional sense. What she needed was someone to see her, really see her, not as a project or a charity case, but as a human being worthy of dignity and respect. The truth is, we're all looking for that, aren't we? To be seen, to be recognized, to have someone look past the surface and acknowledge the struggles we carry silently. Emily had become invisible to most people, just another face in the urban landscape that comfortable people trained themselves not to see. But invisibility does something to the soul. It makes you question your worth, wonder if you matter at all, doubt whether you deserve the space you occupy in the world. Yet she persisted. Day after day, she woke up when most people were still sleeping, found ways to keep herself clean with limited resources, maintained her dignity when everything around her suggested she should give up. This kind of strength doesn't come from privilege or comfort. It comes from something deeper, something that can't be taught in classrooms or bought in stores. It comes from choosing yourself, choosing life, choosing hope, even when hope seems foolish. And that's where our story truly begins. Not with wealth or status, not with grand gestures or dramatic moments, but with a simple encounter on an ordinary day that would prove that destiny sometimes works in whispers rather than shouts. Two lives, seemingly from different worlds, about to discover that the distance between wealth and poverty, comfort and suffering, is far smaller than society wants us to believe. Because at the end of the day, we're all just human beings searching for connection, purpose, and someone who sees us for who we really are. Emily's story didn't start with romance. It started with suffering. She had learned early that life doesn't ask permission before it takes everything away. Loss shaped her, but it didn't harden her heart. Oddly enough, kindness survived where comfort didn't. She smiled at strangers, shared silence with the broken, and believed quietly that fate still had unfinished business with her, even when reality said otherwise. The morning started like every other morning in her life on the streets. She woke before dawn, her body stiff from sleeping on cardboard, her breath visible in the cold air. The city was just beginning to stir, delivery trucks rumbling past, early commuters hurrying to catch trains, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery 3 blocks away reminding her stomach of what it didn't have. She folded her makeshift bed carefully, storing it behind a dumpster where it wouldn't be thrown away. These small rituals of dignity mattered. They reminded her she was still a person, still deserving of respect, even if the world had forgotten. Some nights, she dreamed of a hand reaching out of the dark, calm and steady, like a miracle waiting to happen. It always vanished before she could touch it, leaving her awake, heart racing, wondering if hope was teasing her again. These dreams felt cruelly real. She could almost feel the warmth of that phantom hand, sense the safety it promised. But morning always came with its harsh truth. She was alone, and that hand existed only in her sleeping mind. She'd developed a routine over the years, a structure that gave her days meaning, even when everything else felt meaningless. Morning was for finding water, washing her face in public restrooms, trying to look presentable enough that security guards wouldn't immediately chase her away. Mid-morning was for positioning herself in a spot with good foot traffic, but not so visible that police would move her along. Afternoon was for observing, learning, watching the rhythm of human life flow past her like a river she could see but couldn't enter. Then came that rainy morning, grey and indifferent. Emily sat on the sidewalk, holding a worn sign, "Please, I just need help." Not begging for pity, just a second chance to breathe without fear. The rain started as a drizzle, then grew heavier, soaking through her thin jacket. She watched people hurry past, umbrellas blooming like flowers, everyone focused on getting somewhere dry. No one stopped, no one looked. She'd become so accustomed to this invisibility that she barely registered it anymore. But then something changed. A luxury car, sleek, black, expensive enough that Emily couldn't even guess its worth, slowed down near where she sat. She didn't look up at first. Rich people sometimes slowed down to stare, to satisfy their curiosity about how the other half lived before speeding away to their comfortable lives. She'd learned not to expect anything from expensive cars. That's when the luxury car stopped completely, and Louis stepped out. He was a man drowning in abundance, but starving for peace, though Emily couldn't know that yet. All she saw was another wealthy person, probably about to lecture her about getting a job or pulling herself up by her bootstraps, advice that sounds simple when you've never had to live it. But he didn't look at her with charity or ego. He looked with respect, as if destiny had tapped his shoulder and said, "Pay attention." Louis crouched down to her level, getting his expensive suit wet in the process, and that simple gesture said more than words could. He wasn't standing over her, talking down at her. He was meeting her where she was, literally and figuratively. When he asked, "Can I help you?" his voice carried no condescension, no performance of generosity for onlookers to admire. It was quiet, genuine, almost uncertain, as if he wasn't sure he had the right to offer help at all. Emily laughed, a sound bitter and tired, rough from years of disappointment. She'd heard promises before, people who meant well for a day, a week, until the novelty wore off and they returned to their comfortable lives, conscience cleared. "Help," she repeated, her voice carrying the weight of every broken promise she'd encountered. "Everyone says they want to help, then tomorrow comes, and I'm still here." She didn't say it with anger, just exhaustion. This was simply the truth she'd learned. Still, something about that moment felt different. Maybe it was the way Louis stayed crouched in the rain, not rushing off, not looking uncomfortable. Maybe it was how he didn't flinch when she challenged him, didn't get defensive or offended. He just nodded slowly, as if he understood that trust had to be earned, not assumed. There was a quality in his eyes, a sadness, perhaps, or a searching, that suggested he was looking for something too, though Emily couldn't imagine what a man in a car like that could possibly need. "I understand," Louis said simply. "You don't know me. You have no reason to trust me, but I'm asking anyway. Can I at least buy you a hot meal, no strings attached? You eat, and then I leave. That's it." It was the "no strings attached" that caught her attention. Most help came with invisible strings that tightened later, expectations, judgments, conditions. But he was offering something simple and finite, a meal, nothing more. What Emily didn't know was that Louis had driven past this corner dozens of times before, always seeing her there, always feeling that tug of discomfort that comfortable people feel when confronted with suffering they can't ignore. Today, something had finally compelled him to stop. Maybe it was the rain, making her situation seem even more desperate. Maybe it was his own growing sense that his life, despite its luxury, felt empty. Maybe it was unexpected love knocking softly, asking to be noticed, and testing whether either of them was ready for a transformation that would change everything. In that moment, with rain falling around them and the city rushing past, two worlds collided. One world of material abundance but spiritual poverty, another of material poverty but spiritual richness. Neither of them understood yet that this meeting wasn't random, that fate had been carefully arranging this moment for longer than either could imagine. All they knew was that something felt significant, important, worth paying attention to, even if they couldn't yet name what that something was. Louis came back the next day, and then the next, rain or shine, no speeches, no drama, just presence. He brought food, a jacket once, clean shoes another time. Emily accepted none of the money. Her voice was steady, but her eyes carried broken hope. She'd learned that help often comes with invisible chains, and suffering had taught her to guard every inch of her freedom. The pattern became routine, almost ritualistic. Every morning around 10, Louis would appear with something: coffee, a breakfast sandwich, sometimes just conversation. At first, Emily was suspicious. "Ami, what do you want?" she'd ask, searching his face for hidden motives. Everyone wanted something. That's how the world worked. Nothing was ever truly free, especially for people like her. Kindness from strangers, particularly wealthy strangers, usually came with a price tag that revealed itself later. "I don't want anything that makes me depend on you," she said one morning, her words building emotional walls brick by brick. It wasn't pride, it was survival. Kindness, when withdrawn, hurts more than hunger. She'd experienced this before, people who helped until it became inconvenient, until their friends questioned why they were wasting time on a homeless person, until the reality of long-term commitment outweighed the good feelings of short-term charity. Louis didn't argue. He listened. Sometimes silence is the most respectful form of care, and in that quiet, trust issues spoke louder than words. He seemed to understand something that most people didn't, that trust isn't given, it's earned through consistency, not through grand gestures or expensive gifts, but through showing up, day after day, week after week, being predictable in a world where Emily had learned that nothing and no one was predictable. "I had everything once," Louis finally shared one day, his voice quiet. "Big house, successful business, respect from everyone who mattered. But I lost something along the way. I lost myself. I stopped seeing people, really seeing them, and I definitely stopped feeling anything real." He paused, watching a bird peck at crumbs nearby. "Then I saw you, and something shifted, like waking up from a long sleep." Emily studied him, with the keen perception of someone who'd learned to read people for survival. She could spot a liar, a manipulator, someone with selfish intent. But Louis seemed different. He wasn't performing for an audience. There was no social media camera capturing his generosity, no friends watching to praise his character. It was just him, showing up, asking for nothing in return. Still, she couldn't quite believe it. Life had taught her that things that seemed too good to be true usually were. That's when Louis noticed something rare. She wasn't waiting for a savior. She wanted dignity, not rescue. In a world obsessed with grand gestures and dramatic transformations, Emily's quiet strength felt like a miracle in plain sight. Most people in her situation would have jumped at any offer of help, any promise of improvement. But Emily was different. She'd rather struggle with her dignity intact than thrive under someone else's control. "Why do you keep coming back?" Emily asked one afternoon, genuine confusion in her voice. "You could be anywhere, doing anything. Why waste your time on someone like me?" There was no self-pity in the question, just honest bewilderment. In her experience, wealthy people didn't spend their mornings sitting on sidewalks talking to homeless people unless they wanted something. A story to tell, a tax write-off, a feeling of moral superiority. Louis thought about this for a long moment. "Because talking to you is the most real thing in my life right now," he admitted. "Everything else is performance. Business meetings where everyone says what they think I want to hear. Social events where people pretend to like each other. Relationships built on what I can provide rather than who I am. But you don't care about any of that. You see me as just another person, and that's refreshing." It was true. Emily didn't know the details of Louis's wealth or status. She had no concept of the empire he'd built, the influence he wielded, the doors that opened automatically for him. To her, he was just a man who showed up every morning with coffee and conversation. This leveled playing field created an authenticity that Louis hadn't experienced in years, perhaps decades. With Emily, he wasn't performing success, he was just being human. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Emily's walls began to develop tiny cracks. Not because Louis was pushing against them, but because his consistency was eroding them naturally. She found herself actually looking forward to his visits, preparing questions to ask him, even occasionally smiling at his stories about the absurdity of wealthy people's problems. "You paid how much for a watch?" she'd ask, incredulous. And that could feed someone for a year. And Louis would laugh, really laugh, seeing his world through her eyes and realizing how ridiculous much of it was. You're right, he'd admit. When you put it that way, it sounds insane. These conversations became mirrors, reflecting back to him the emptiness of accumulation without purpose, the hollowness of success without meaning, the loneliness of wealth without connection. But Emily's trust issues ran deep, carved into her psyche by years of disappointment. One day, Louis didn't show up. Something had come up, an emergency meeting, a business crisis that demanded his immediate attention. Emily sat in her usual spot, watching the time when he normally arrived come and go. Of course, she whispered to herself, that familiar resignation settling back in. It was too good to be true. He got bored, or he realized I'm not worth the time, or he just forgot about me. When Louis appeared the next day, apologizing profusely and explaining what had happened, Emily's face was closed off, guarded. "It's fine," she said, her voice flat. "You don't owe me anything. I never expected you to keep coming anyway." The pain in her voice was evident, that old wound of abandonment freshly reopened. She'd let herself hope just a little, and it had hurt exactly as she'd known it would. "Emily," Louis said, and the way he said her name, with genuine regret and care, made her look up. "I should have found a way to let you know. I'm sorry. This wasn't about losing interest or forgetting. This was about life happening and me not being prepared for it. But I'm here now, and I'll be here tomorrow, and the day after that. I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to." Something in his earnestness reached her. Maybe it was the fact that he acknowledged her hurt rather than dismissing it. Maybe it was the vulnerability in his admission. Maybe it was simply that she was tired of being alone, tired of pushing everyone away as a preemptive strike against inevitable abandonment. Whatever it was, she nodded slowly, allowing that tiny crack in her walls to widen just a bit more. And slowly, without realizing it, fate began weaving a fragile thread between them, one that would soon be tested by deeper truths neither of them had said out loud. This wasn't a fairy tale transformation happening overnight. It was two damaged people, each carrying their own suffering, learning to trust in microscopic increments. Building something real, something lasting, requires time and patience, qualities that a world obsessed with instant gratification has forgotten, but that genuine connection still demands. With time, Louis stopped standing in front of her and started sitting beside her. No agenda, no rush. They talked about life the way tired souls do, honest, unfiltered, without the social masks people usually wear. Dreams that never made it past youth, losses that still echoed at night, fears that seemed too heavy to share with anyone who hadn't also known real suffering. The sidewalk became their confessional, the city noise their privacy. Emily spoke about her family, her voice calm but heavy, describing a suffering that never really leaves, only learns to whisper. She talked about her mother's laugh, how it could fill a room and make everything feel safe. About her father's hands, rough from work but gentle when he tucked her in at night. About the car accident that took them both in seconds, leaving her with survivor's guilt that still woke her up some nights, asking why she'd been spared when they hadn't. "Loneliness," she said one day, watching pigeons fight over a piece of bread, "hurts more than hunger because it convinces you that you don't matter. When you're hungry, at least you know what you need. But when you're lonely, when nobody sees you, when you could disappear and the world would just keep spinning, that's a different kind of pain. That's the kind that makes you question why you're even trying." Louis listened, really listened, in a way that people rarely do anymore. He wasn't waiting for his turn to speak, wasn't comparing her pain to his own, wasn't offering quick solutions or empty platitudes. He was simply present, holding space for her truth, acknowledging her pain without trying to fix it. And in those conversations, something shifted. A bridge was being built between their worlds, plank by plank, story by story. He shared his own losses too. A marriage that crumbled under the weight of success, a wife who'd loved his potential but couldn't stand his reality, children who called him by his first name and scheduled appointments to see him, treating him more like a business associate than a father, friends who disappeared the moment his company faced difficulties, revealing that loyalty often has a price tag attached. "I have everything," he admitted, "and somehow that adds up to nothing." Emily saw that his kindness wasn't naive, it was intentional, almost rebellious. Just as she'd chosen to stay gentle in a harsh world, he was choosing to reconnect with his humanity in a world that rewarded ruthlessness. That kind of strength changes you. It gave him hope, the uncomfortable kind that asks you to look at yourself and acknowledge what you've become, what you've lost in pursuit of success, what you've sacrificed at the altar of ambition. He began to wonder if this meeting wasn't random at all, if fate had arranged it to confront both of them with who they truly were beneath the circumstances that defined them. Emily wasn't just a homeless woman, and Louis wasn't just a billionaire. They were two people who'd lost their way, finding each other at the exact moment when they both needed to be found. The conversations deepened, became more vulnerable. Emily talked about the shame that came with being homeless, not just the lack of resources, but the way people looked through her as if she didn't exist. "You become invisible," she explained. "People train themselves not to see you because seeing you makes them uncomfortable. You're a reminder that life can fall apart, that there but for grace goes anyone. So they look away, and after a while, you start to wonder if you're even real." Louis felt this observation like a punch to the gut. How many times had he looked away? How many people had he passed without really seeing, too absorbed in his own world to acknowledge theirs? Emily was holding up a mirror, showing him the person he'd become, insulated by wealth, disconnected by success, isolated by the very achievements society told him to pursue. "And I used to have dreams," Emily continued one day, her eyes distant. "Real dreams, not just survival goals. I wanted to be a teacher. I loved watching kids learn, that moment when something clicks and their whole face lights up. I was good at it too, in the foster homes. The little kids would follow me around, ask me questions, trust me, but you can't become a teacher when you can't even keep yourself fed." This revelation shifted something in Louis. He'd been thinking of Emily as someone who needed help, someone to rescue, but now he saw her differently, as someone with interrupted potential, with talents and dreams that had been derailed by circumstances beyond her control. She wasn't broken. She was delayed. Her transformation wasn't about becoming someone new. It was about becoming who she was always meant to be. One night, everything crystallized. Louis had brought extra food, as usual, and watched as Emily immediately offered half to an elderly man huddled in a doorway nearby, smiling as if she had plenty. She did this without hesitation, without calculation, without expecting anything in return. In that moment, it hit him like a quiet miracle. Her soul was richer than any empire he had built. He sat there, watching her share her meager resources with someone who had even less, and understood something fundamental about wealth and poverty. Money measures what you have, but character measures who you are. Emily had nothing but gave anyway. He had everything but had stopped giving long ago, not just money, which was easy, but time, attention, genuine care. He'd become stingy with the things that actually mattered. That wasn't admiration anymore. It was awe, the realization that he'd been living wrong, chasing wrong things, measuring success by wrong metrics. Emily, sitting on a sidewalk with holes in her shoes, was succeeding at the one thing that truly mattered, remaining human in an inhumane world. And deep down, he felt the pull of unexpected love, the kind that starts a transformation before you even dare to name it, and prepares the heart for a second chance neither of them saw coming. The dynamic between them was changing. Louis noticed he was happier, lighter, more present in his own life. His assistant commented that he seemed different, asked if something good had happened. His business partners noted that he was more patient in meetings, less focused on destroying competition, and more interested in building something meaningful. They attributed it to a new business strategy. They couldn't see what Louis was beginning to understand, that Emily was teaching him how to be wealthy in ways that had nothing to do with money. And Emily, despite her best efforts to remain guarded, found herself opening up in ways she hadn't in years. She laughed more easily, allowed herself to hope more freely, even started to imagine a future beyond mere survival. Louis asked about her dreams sometimes, and she'd find herself talking about them as if they were still possible, as if life might still have more in store for her than cold sidewalks and empty stomachs. This connection they were building wasn't romantic yet, at least not consciously. It was something deeper, something more fundamental. It was two souls recognizing each other, seeing past the external circumstances to the essential humanity underneath. In a world obsessed with surfaces and appearances, they were connecting at a level that bypassed all of that, meeting in a space where wealth and poverty became irrelevant, where only character and kindness mattered. But both of them could feel something building, something unnamed but undeniable, a pull toward each other that went beyond friendship, beyond charity, beyond circumstance. Destiny was weaving their lives together with threads they couldn't yet see, preparing them for choices they hadn't yet realized they'd have to make, setting the stage for a transformation that would require courage from both of them. Louis didn't offer a rescue plan. He offered dignity. No headlines, no contracts, no strings attached. Just a small room, clean sheets, and a chance at honest work. Simple things that feel revolutionary when you've known only suffering. Emily resisted at first. Hope had betrayed her before, and she wasn't eager for another lesson in disappointment. Still, something about his consistency felt different, almost like destiny choosing patience over drama. The offer came on a Tuesday morning, ordinary and unremarkable except for what it meant. Louis had arrived with coffee, as usual, but this time he'd brought something else, keys. "I own a building across town," he explained, his voice careful, aware that this moment could go wrong in a dozen different ways. "There's a small apartment, nothing fancy, just one room with a bathroom and a little kitchen. It's yours if you want it. No rent, no conditions, just a place to be safe." Emily stared at the keys as if they were a trap. "Why?" she asked, her voice tight with suspicion. "Nobody gives away free apartments. What do you want from me?" She'd heard stories about situations like this, wealthy men offering help to vulnerable women, expecting payment in forms that had nothing to do with money. Her body tensed, ready to run if she saw any sign that this was what Louis wanted. "I want you to have a place where you don't have to worry about being cold or wet or unsafe," Louis said simply. "That's it. The door locks, the heat works, there's hot water. You can say yes or no. Either way, I'll still show up tomorrow with coffee. This doesn't change anything between us except giving you options you don't currently have." What changed her mind wasn't the offer itself, but the way Louis spoke, calm, grounded, asking instead of telling. He made it clear this wasn't charity, it was a second chance. He wasn't saving her, he was providing resources so she could save herself. There's a crucial difference that most people doing good deeds miss. Charity creates dependency. Dignity creates opportunity. Louis seemed to understand this instinctively. Emily took the keys with shaking hands. "I'll pay you back," she said immediately, needing to establish that this wasn't a gift that created obligation. "I don't know how or when, but I will. I don't want to owe anyone anything." Louis nodded, respecting this boundary. "Okay," he said. "Just we'll figure it out together." The first night in the apartment, Emily couldn't sleep. The bed felt too soft after years on concrete. The silence felt too loud without city noise surrounding her. She kept getting up to check that the door was really locked, that this wasn't a dream she'd wake up from to find herself back on the street. She sat in the small kitchen as dawn broke, making tea on a stove that was hers to use, watching morning light fill a space that was actually hers, and cried for the first time in years, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming experience of safety. And strangely enough, as Emily began to rebuild her life, Louis began to rebuild his soul. Watching her take pride in small victories sparked a transformation in him he couldn't ignore. She found work at a local cafe, took pride in her uniform, came home exhausted but satisfied. She kept the apartment spotlessly clean, treated it like a palace because to her, after years on the street, it was... Louis saw her transformation and felt challenged by it. She was doing more with less, finding joy in simple things, rebuilding from nothing with more grace than he'd ever shown with everything. It forced him to examine his own life, the meaningless luxuries, the hollow achievements, the relationships based on transaction rather than connection. What was he really doing with his wealth? What legacy was he building beyond numbers in accounts? She smiled again. Slowly, carefully, like someone testing the ground after a long winter. The first time Louis saw her really smile, not a polite response but genuine joy, was when she received her first paycheck. She showed it to him like a trophy, this small proof that she was earning her way, providing for herself, becoming independent again. "Look," she said, her eyes bright, "I did this me." Louis realized then that true love doesn't arrive with fireworks. It arrives with respect. He wasn't falling for her because she was beautiful or because she needed him. He was falling for her because she was strong, resilient, determined to maintain her dignity against all odds. She refused to be diminished by circumstances. She chose kindness when cruelty would have been justified. She kept trying when giving up would have been easier. And in that quiet rebirth, he felt a miracle unfolding, one that hinted this journey wasn't just about healing, but about choosing each other when the time came. The transformation wasn't one-sided. Emily was finding stability. Yes, but Louis was finding purpose. His morning visits had become the highlight of his day. Board meetings felt less important than hearing about Emily's shift at the cafe. Business deals felt hollow compared to the simple satisfaction of seeing someone he cared about thrive. His perspective on wealth shifted fundamentally. He'd spent his life accumulating more money, more property, more power, more success. But watching Emily find contentment with so little exposed the emptiness of endless accumulation. She had one room, basic furniture, a simple job, and she was happier than he'd been in decades, despite having everything money could buy. Louis started changing his business practices. He began paying attention to his employees as people rather than resources. He asked about their families, their struggles, their dreams. He implemented better benefits, more reasonable hours, programs to help workers facing hardship. His business partners thought he'd gone soft. His shareholders worried about profit margins, but Louis was finally wealthy in a way that mattered. He was investing in human beings, not just returns on investment. The transformation rippled outward. His relationship with his children improved because he was finally present, finally listening, finally caring about their lives more than their achievements. His business became more profitable because happy employees work harder, stay longer, care more. His stress decreased because he wasn't constantly performing success. He was actually living life. Emily noticed these changes in Louis. "You seem different," she observed one day, "lighter somehow, like you're not carrying as much weight." Louis smiled. "That's because you're teaching me what actually matters," he admitted. "I've been wealthy my whole adult life, but I've been poor in every way that counts. You're showing me how to be rich in the things money can't buy." But there was something else changing between them, something neither of them had named yet. The conversations had deepened. The silences had become comfortable. The space between them felt charged with possibility. Louis found himself thinking about Emily at odd moments, wondering if she'd like a particular book, wanting to share a thought or observation, missing her presence when they were apart. And Emily, despite her best efforts to guard her heart, found herself feeling things she'd convinced herself weren't meant for people like her. Hope, real hope, was creeping back in. Not just hope for survival or stability, but hope for something more. Connection, partnership, maybe even love. It terrified her, because if she let herself hope and it ended badly, the fall would be catastrophic. She'd survived losing everything once. She wasn't sure she could do it again. Louis tried to deny it at first. He told himself it was admiration, maybe gratitude, maybe the satisfaction of seeing someone rise again. But feelings don't listen to logic, do they? Somewhere between shared silences and honest laughter, unexpected love had taken root, not loud, not reckless, just steady, the kind that grows when two people face suffering without pretending it didn't shape them. The realization hit him during an ordinary moment, which is often how the most profound truths arrive. They were sitting in Emily's apartment, eating take-out Thai food, arguing good-naturedly about whether the green curry was too spicy. Emily was laughing, defending her tolerance for heat, when Louis looked at her and thought, "This is it. This is what I've been looking for my entire life, without knowing I was looking for it." It wasn't about her looks, though she was beautiful. It wasn't about what she could offer him, because in material terms, she had nothing. It was about how he felt when he was with her, seen, understood, valued for who he actually was, rather than what he could provide. It was about her strength, her resilience, her refusal to let hardship make her hard. It was about recognizing that she was the best person he'd ever known, and knowing that was possible in a universe where they existed together felt like a gift. He realized this wasn't about saving anyone. Emily didn't need a hero, she needed a companion. That clarity hit him like a miracle disguised as simplicity. All his life, he'd been taught that love was about grand gestures, expensive gifts, impressive demonstrations of devotion. But real love, he was discovering, was about showing up consistently, listening carefully, respecting boundaries, and choosing someone every single day. One evening, with no script and no armor, he spoke the truth. "I don't want to fix your life. I want to walk beside you." The words came out simpler than he'd planned, stripped of the eloquence he'd rehearsed. But maybe that was better. Maybe the most important things we say should be simple, direct, undressed by performance or pretense. Emily looked at him, really looked at him, searching his face for any hint of deception or delusion. "Louis," she said carefully, "you don't know what you're saying. You have a whole world I'm not part of. People in your life won't understand this. They'll think I'm using you, that I'm after your money. And you'll eventually see me the way everyone else does, as a project, a charity case, someone from a different world." "You're right," Louis acknowledged. "People will talk. They already are, actually. My business partners think I'm having a midlife crisis. My ex-wife called to ask if I was okay. My friends, well, the people I thought were friends, have made their opinions clear. But here's what I finally understand. I've spent my whole life caring what everyone else thinks, performing for an audience, seeking approval from people whose opinions shouldn't matter. And where did that get me? Wealthy and miserable." He moved closer, his voice intense with conviction. "You're the first person in decades who's seen me, really seen me. Not my bank account, not my business, not my status, just me. The boring parts, the difficult parts, the parts I'm not proud of, and you didn't run, you didn't try to change me or use me, you just accepted me. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Do you know what it means to be with someone who wants nothing from you except your presence?" Emily's eyes filled with tears. "But I'm not," I can't give you the kind of life someone like you deserves. I can't attend fancy parties or fit into your world. I barely fit into any world. What happens when the novelty wears off, when you realize I don't belong in your life? You're wrong about one thing, Louis said gently. You already belong in my life. You're the best part of my life. Everything else is just stuff, accumulation without meaning. But you make me want to be better. You make me think about legacy differently, not what I leave behind in dollars, but what I do with the time I have. Who I am when nobody's watching, whether I'm living with integrity or just performing success. It was a choice, clear, deliberate, filled with hope and respect. Louis wasn't proposing marriage in that moment, but he was proposing something just as significant, a commitment to build something real together, to face whatever challenges came, to choose each other despite all the logical reasons they shouldn't work. Emily cried, not from fear this time, but from recognition. For the first time, someone had chosen her, not her past, not her pain, just her. Not because of what she could offer or how she fit into their life plans, but simply because of who she was. The weight of being truly seen, truly valued, truly chosen was almost too much to bear. For the first time in her life, Emily felt what it meant to be loved, not for her potential or her gratitude, but for her actual self, flaws, fears, and all. In that moment, true love felt less like romance and more like destiny finally aligning. And as they stood there, hearts exposed, life quietly prepared the final test, the one that would turn intention into forever. But accepting love when you've learned not to expect it requires its own kind of courage. Emily had spent years protecting herself, building walls, expecting disappointment. Now Louis was asking her to be vulnerable, to risk everything she'd carefully protected. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm scared of needing you. I'm scared of losing you. I'm scared that this isn't real, that I'll wake up and it will all have been a beautiful dream. I'm scared too, Louis confessed. I'm scared of failing you. I'm scared I'm too broken from years of living wrong to do this right. I'm scared that I don't know how to love someone properly because I've never really learned. But here's what I know. Being scared and being ready aren't mutually exclusive. Sometimes you just have to jump and trust that you'll figure out how to fly on the way down. They sat in silence for a long moment, both processing what was happening between them. This wasn't a fairy tale moment with swelling music and perfect certainty. This was two real people, both damaged in their own ways, choosing to trust each other with their most vulnerable parts. That takes a kind of courage that romance movies never capture. Okay, Emily finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Okay, let's try. Let's see what happens if we stop being afraid and start being brave. And in that quiet yes, in that small act of choosing hope over fear, both of them felt something shift, a door opening, a path appearing, a second chance taking shape where no chance had seemed possible before. Louis took her hand, and for the first time, Emily didn't pull away. She let herself be held, be supported, be seen. And Louis felt the enormous privilege of that trust, the responsibility of caring for a heart that had been broken so many times before. He made a silent promise to be worthy of that trust, to show up every day, to choose her every day, to build something lasting from the raw materials of kindness and respect. This was the beginning of something neither of them had experienced before, a love built not on need or convenience, but on genuine recognition and respect. A partnership between equals, despite what society's measurements would suggest, because Emily's strength matched Louis's in every way that mattered, and her wisdom exceeded his in the areas where he'd been blind. Together, they were beginning to understand that fate had brought them together not to rescue each other, but to complete each other. Louis didn't plan a spectacle, no luxury hall, no flashing lights, no audience waiting to applaud. He understood something most people miss. Moments born from true love don't need witnesses, they need truth. So he chose simplicity, a quiet place, honest words, a pause long enough for courage to catch up with his heart. After a life of excess, this felt like the greatest transformation he could make. The place he chose was meaningful, the sidewalk where they'd first met. He'd thought about fancy restaurants, scenic overlooks, romantic destinations, but all of those felt wrong, like he'd be performing for society's expectations rather than honoring their actual story. Their love hadn't begun in beauty and comfort. It had begun in hardship and truth. That deserved to be acknowledged. Emily was confused when Louis asked her to take a walk to that particular corner. "Why are we going here?" she asked, memories of cold nights and desperate times flooding back. It wasn't a place she visited anymore, avoiding it like we avoid reminders of our pain, but Louis was insistent. "Trust me," he said. "There's something I need to do here." When they arrived, the spot looked different than it had that rainy day years ago. The street had been cleaned up, new businesses had opened, the city's constant evolution erasing traces of the past. But the memory remained vivid for both of them. Two strangers, one asking for help, one stopping to listen, neither knowing how completely that moment would reshape their lives. He looked at Emily and spoke without rehearsing. He talked about fate, about how some meetings look accidental but carry the weight of destiny. He admitted his fears, his emptiness, and how her kindness had rebuilt parts of him money never could. "I was rich," he said, "in the most meaningless way possible. I had everything and felt nothing. Then I met you, sitting right here, and you taught me what wealth actually means. You showed me that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting up every time. That dignity isn't about what you have. It's about who you are when you have nothing. That kindness isn't weakness. It's the hardest, bravest choice anyone can make. You chose it every day, even when life gave you every reason to choose bitterness instead. That's not just impressive, that's extraordinary." Emily's eyes filled with tears. No one had ever spoken to her this way, seeing her struggles not as shameful failures, but as evidence of character. Society had taught her to feel embarrassed about being homeless, as if it were a moral failing rather than a circumstance. But Louis saw her homelessness as the context in which her true nature had been revealed and proven. "I'm not perfect," Louis continued. "I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to disappoint you sometimes. I'm still learning how to be the kind of man worthy of someone like you, but I want to spend the rest of my life trying. I want to wake up next to you when we're old and grey, still learning from you, still being amazed by you, still choosing you every single day." Then he asked, softly, respectfully, if she would walk with him for the rest of their lives. No promises of perfection, just commitment and hope. He pulled out a ring, simple and elegant, nothing ostentatious. "I know this is unconventional," he said. "I know people will talk. I know we'll face challenges. But Emily, you're the best decision I've ever made. The only decision that's ever really mattered. Will you marry me?" Emily said yes, tears falling not from disbelief, but from certainty. Not because he was a billionaire, but because he saw her when no one else did, when she was invisible, when suffering tried to erase her. In that yes lived a miracle, a second chance, and an unexpected love that proved sometimes the most powerful endings aren't endings at all. They're doorways to something even deeper. "I never thought this was possible for me," Emily admitted through tears. "I thought love was something that happened to other people, people who hadn't been broken the way I'd been broken. I thought I'd spend my life alone, and I'd made peace with that. Then you showed up and changed everything, not by rescuing me, but by seeing me, by staying, by choosing me every single day until I could believe I was worth choosing." Louis slipped the ring on her finger, and they stood there on that sidewalk, holding each other, both crying now. Passers-by gave them curious looks, a well-dressed man and a young woman, embracing on a street corner, both visibly emotional. None of those strangers could know the full story, the journey that had brought them to this moment, the transformation that had occurred in both of them. "I love you," Louis said, and meant it with every fibre of his being, not the romantic movie version of love, but the real thing, the choice to commit, to stay, to work through difficulties, to choose each other even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. "I love you too," Emily replied, allowing herself to fully feel it without fear for the first time. She loved him not for what he'd given her materially, but for how he'd treated her humanely. For respecting her autonomy, valuing her opinions, honoring her boundaries, for seeing her as an equal partner rather than a project to fix. They made their way back to the apartment, their apartment now, Louis having fully moved in months ago. His penthouse sitting empty because home wasn't a place anymore, it was a person. That evening, they started planning their wedding. Nothing elaborate, they agreed. Something small and meaningful, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about them rather than their story or status. The news eventually spread, of course. The media loved it. Billionaire marries homeless woman he met on street. The coverage ranged from supportive to cynical, from romantic to suspicious. Some accused Emily of gold digging, unable to imagine that someone might choose a person over their portfolio. Others romanticized it into a fairy tale, missing the real work and growth both had undertaken. But Louis and Emily had learned to tune out the noise. They knew their truth. They'd lived their story. They understood something that spectators never would. This wasn't about wealth-saving poverty or privilege, rescuing disadvantage. This was about two people finding each other at exactly the right moment, when both needed to be found. About choosing kindness and respect and genuine connection in a world that often values none of those things. The wedding day arrived simple and perfect. Emily wore a dress that made her feel beautiful but comfortable. Louis wore a suit but no tie, relaxed and genuinely happy in a way his friends had never seen him. The venue was small, the guest list smaller, but everyone there mattered. Everyone there knew them not as a headline, but as two people building a life together. As they exchanged vows, both cried again. Emily promised to keep reminding Louis of what truly matters when the world tried to pull him back into empty pursuits. Louis promised to keep seeing Emily, really seeing her for who she was and could become. They promised to face suffering together, to celebrate victories together, to build a life of meaning rather than just accumulation. And when the officiant pronounced them married, when they kissed as husband and wife, the small crowd erupted in genuine joy. This wasn't a society wedding or a business merger. This was love, messy, real, hard-won, and absolutely worth it. Life can take almost everything from us. It can steal comfort, security, and even our sense of direction. But there's one thing it can never take: who we choose to be. Emily lost her home, her family, and her sense of safety, yet she never surrendered her kindness, and that choice, repeated through years of suffering, quietly shaped her destiny. Think about that for a moment. When everything external was stripped away, when she had every justification to become bitter, angry, or cruel, Emily chose differently. She chose to remain human in circumstances designed to dehumanize. She chose to share when she had nothing to share. She chose to hope when hope seemed foolish. These weren't grand, dramatic choices. They were small, daily decisions that accumulated into character. Being honest, being transparent, being human. These aren't soft virtues. They're rare strengths. Louis had wealth, power, and status, but it was Emily's character that changed him. Not her pain, not her past, but the way she treated others when no one was watching. That's the real transformation most people overlook. Money can change your life, but character changes your soul. We live in a world obsessed with external measures of success. How much money do you make? What do you own? What's your status? Where do you rank? And yes, these things matter for survival and comfort, but they don't matter for fulfillment. They don't create meaning. They don't build connection. They don't leave a legacy that actually matters when you're gone. So ask yourself, what are you protecting in a world that keeps trying to harden you? What parts of yourself are you refusing to surrender, despite pressure to become more cynical, more guarded, more self-interested? Because true love, real connection, and lasting fulfillment don't respond to ego or appearances. They respond to hope, to integrity, and to hearts that stay clean even when life feels unfair. Emily's story isn't unique in its hardship. Unfortunately, many people face suffering, loss, and circumstances beyond their control. What makes her story remarkable is her response. She didn't let suffering define her. She didn't use her pain as an excuse to hurt others. She maintained her humanity when it would have been so much easier to lose it. That's the lesson worth learning. And Louis's story matters too. He had everything society tells us to pursue and discovered it was hollow. He could have spent his entire life comfortable and miserable, never questioning whether his pursuits actually led anywhere worth going. But he stopped. He looked. He saw someone who had nothing but lived richer than he did, and he had the courage to change. That's unexpected love, not the romantic comedy version, but the real thing. Love that challenges you to be better. Love that holds up a mirror and shows you who you've become and who you could still be. Love that costs something, demands something, transforms something. Love that requires courage because it means being vulnerable enough to change. This story is an invitation, not to wait for a billionaire to save you or to find a homeless person to rescue, but to examine your own life, your own choices, your own character. Are you accumulating things or building meaning? Are you maintaining appearances or cultivating authenticity? Are you protecting your heart or closing it off entirely? Are you choosing kindness even when it's difficult? Because here's the truth most people miss. Destiny isn't something that happens to you. It's something you create through daily choices. Emily didn't accidentally develop character. She chose it repeatedly. Louis didn't stumble into transformation. He committed to it consciously. Their second chance at happiness came because both of them did the work, made the choices, and stayed open to possibility when it would have been easier to stay closed. The world will try to harden you. It will give you reasons to stop trusting, stop caring, stop hoping. It will show you cruelty and pain and injustice and say, see, this is reality, adjust accordingly. And yes, you need to be wise, set boundaries, protect yourself from genuine harm. But wisdom and cynicism aren't the same thing. Protection and isolation aren't the same thing. Being realistic and being hopeless aren't the same thing. You can acknowledge that the world is often harsh while choosing to be kind anyway. You can protect yourself while remaining open to connection. You can be realistic about challenges while maintaining hope for transformation. These aren't contradictions. They're the balance that creates a life worth living. If this story reminded you of who you want to be, don't ignore that feeling. Apply it. Choose kindness today, not as a weakness but as a strength. Choose honesty in your relationships, even when lying would be easier. Choose to believe in second chances, for others and for yourself. Choose to see people, really see them, the way Louis learned to see Emily. Choose to maintain your character even when circumstances try to steal it, the way Emily did. Start small. Share something when you'd rather hoard. Listen when you'd rather talk. Help when you'd rather walk past. Forgive when you'd rather hold a grudge. Stay soft when the world pushes you to harden. These tiny choices accumulate into character, and character creates destiny. And if you're in a difficult place right now, financially, emotionally, relationally, remember that circumstances don't define your worth or determine your future. Emily was homeless, but she wasn't worthless. She was temporarily without resources, but she wasn't without value. Your current situation is not your final destination. Your transformation is possible if you're willing to do the work and stay open to opportunities when they appear. But you have to do your part. Emily didn't just wait to be rescued. She maintained her dignity, worked on herself, stayed open to possibility. Lewis didn't just throw money at a problem. He committed time, attention, genuine care. Both of them chose to be vulnerable, to risk rejection, to hope for better, even when experience suggested otherwise. That's what creates miracles, not magic, but courage. What would your life look like if you fully committed to being the kind of person you want to be? Not who society says you should be, not who your past suggests you must be, but who you actually want to be at your core. What if you stopped waiting for circumstances to improve before you started living with integrity? What if you decided that kindness, honesty, and hope were non-negotiable parts of your character, regardless of what happens around you? That's the real miracle of this story. Not that a billionaire married a homeless woman, but that two people chose character over circumstance, connection over comfort, meaning over meaninglessness. They chose each other when logic said they shouldn't work. They chose true love when fear said they'd get hurt. They chose hope when experience said they should give up. You have that same choice. Every single day, you get to decide who you're going to be. The world will give you countless reasons to choose wrong, to be selfish, dishonest, closed off, cruel, but you can choose differently. You can be the person who restores someone's faith in humanity. You can be the unexpected love someone stopped believing was possible. You can be the evidence that goodness still exists. So what are you going to choose? Are you going to let suffering harden you or refine you? Are you going to use your resources, whether abundant or limited, to build something meaningful? Are you going to stay open to transformation even when it's scary? Are you going to believe that second chances are possible, that destiny can shift, that your story isn't over yet? Don't just read this story and move on. Let it change you. Let it challenge you. Let it remind you of who you want to be. Then wake up tomorrow and start being that person, one choice at a time, one day at a time, one act of kindness at a time. That's how you create a life that matters. That's how you build a legacy beyond what you accumulate. That's how you discover that true love of yourself, of others, of life itself was always possible, just waiting for you to be brave enough to choose it. And if you want to keep learning through stories like this, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and walk this journey with us. Because transformation isn't a destination, it's a practice. And we're all in this together, learning how to live with meaning, choose with courage, and love with everything we've got.